Well, Morgan, thanks so much for being on the show today. We are going to talk about everybody's favorite topic in the world, and that is taxes. And
Mm.
while maybe not everyone's favorite, it's certainly relevant to everyone. So I'm excited because I've got questions. You work in the field of taxes. Now, you're specifically specifically in tax debt resolution.
Mhm.
So let's start with that before we get to kind of the practical stuff. What does that mean, and what is it that you actually do?
Boy, thanks so much for having me. I'm super excited to share this. For everybody who groaned at hearing the word tax, I promise this is not going to be a boring conversation. As much as taxes can sometimes be a negative in people's world, I'm here
Right.
to kind of demystify, and take away that anxiety-inducing thought process about it. Um, so yeah, I've been in the tax debt resolution industry for 25 years. When people have a tax problem, whether it's a consequence of an audit, if it's
Mhm.
just you filed a tax return with a bill due, I step in as power of attorney and keep the tax agency calm so they
Mm.
don't feel like they need to take aggressive collection action. And I work on the best solution based on the client's financial condition, short-term goals, and long-term goals. And I kind of marry all those pieces together and I negotiate the solution that best helps address the situation.
All right. So I want to talk about what this looks like, and also we're going to get to some practical stuff for people that maybe not in massive tax debt, but we all have taxes, so we're going to talk about that.
Mhm.
But just to start, like I'm assuming, maybe I'm wrong on this. When you were like 6 years old, probably taxes and tax debt wasn't your dream job.
No.
So how did this become your career?
It was actually just a happy accident. I
Wow.
answered an ad for an administrative assistant in the Boulder Daily Camera, and I tripped into a world that I love. I get to
Mm.
help people when they don't know what to do to solve a
Yeah.
problem, and it's causing a lot of anxiety, sleepless nights. I kind of step in as the white knight in shining armor
Mm.
and get them to a solution and help work with them so they don't have a problem again in the future.
Yeah.
And it feels pretty dang good. That's why I'm so inspired after
Yeah.
doing it for 25
Yeah.
years. I mean, who really grows up thinking they want to deal with tax problems,
That's right.
right? But I love it. I love it.
So how did that happen? I mean, you started as an administrative assistant. Obviously, that's
Mhm.
not what you're doing now. So how
No.
did that start to kind of
Mm.
develop you to where you are today?
Boy, I had always been bored with school. Like I
Mm.
knew what I like. I like numbers, I like negotiating, I like law, I like problem solving. But like you put me in a science class, I fall asleep,
Mm.
right? You put me in computer sciences and I'm like, oh, yeah, not my speed. I just I wasn't a good student. We'll put
Mm.
it that way. Because nothing really had that passion
Yeah.
causing focus, right? And when I was stepping in as an administrative assistant for an attorney who did this, I started seeing a world where I could really jump in and apply
Mm.
myself 110% and have an impact and have a reason to sit down at my desk every day. When you have clients calling you saying, I'm scared, I don't know what to
Mm.
do. And I say, you know what? I've got a solution for you. It feels amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, you help people. You
Yep.
know how that is. Being able to be a catalyst to end something that's really causing problems for somebody, it feels good. And it serves as an inspiration to help more people. And
Yeah.
going from administrative assistant to seeing what I could do with this, it inspired me to study and work hard and earn my enrolled agent,
Yeah.
study and work hard and get my NTPI fellowship, eventually step out and create my own business to provide even better services to clients. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So let's talk about this. You probably have people who reach out, big debt, little debt, all in between.
Mhm.
I don't know if you can think of one or two, but like, what's like one of the worst situations that you've ever had to work with someone through?
Well, I will tell you the most stressful
Okay.
situation is family owned businesses
Mm.
and trusting family members just because they're family members. We all want to hope that people have the same level of integrity and
Mm.
commitment to always doing the right thing that we do. And I can't tell you how many times I've had a client come to me and they'll say, well, I trusted my brother, I
Mm.
trusted my cousin, I trusted my wife's, second cousin twice removed or whatever. And there's a lot of embezzlement and theft and jealousy and ugliness that ends up creating this knot of just lack of integrity with people when it comes to money. A lot of embezzlement, a lot of fraud. They will say, I paid the taxes when in fact they didn't, and they ended up pocketing the money instead.
Yeah.
And that, of all the things in a career, I think that's the hardest part that I had to learn to deal with is seeing kind of the ugly side of human nature and how to help people who are left kind of picking up the pieces and doing the best I could to support them, psychologically, emotionally, as I deal with the big dollar sign issue.
Right. So I imagine the IRS does not care whether it was on purpose or on accident. So if someone's like embezzled money, how to get their taxes. I mean, I know it's probably case specific, but how do you even start to go about finding a solution that doesn't leave someone in jail?
Yeah, well, and that's the hard part, right? I've had a lot of people say, well, I don't want to get the police involved. I don't want to, file a civil suit against them to try to recoup the money. And the IRS says, well, if you don't take those steps, then this is just kind of hearsay. You're telling me that this person stole the money from your business, but if you're not willing to take it a step further, how much credibility is there to the tale you're telling us?
Right.
And we've been successful in some and not as successful with others.
Yeah.
And it's just because when you have a debt to the IRS and you're saying, hey, something happened outside of my control that caused this, they'll look at you as the business owner and say, well, were you involved? Were you looking at things? Did you have checks and balances in place? How much did you rely on just a verbal versus actually looking at the books and records yourself?
Right.
And that's a hard lesson for people, especially where it's the second level of a family-owned business, right? Your parents had this successful company and then they pass it down to you. They pass it down to you with all these family members already intertwined. And then, the ugliness, the greed, the jealousy starts popping up and things start happening. And it's tough. It really is. And through what I do, I'm able to lean on so many years of experience of dealing with the IRS and negotiating through these situations to say, yes, we've done enough, or no, we probably need to take more steps before this is a credible basis.
Yeah. I'm curious. I mean, I know probably the debt amount changes, whether it's an individual business, whatever. But I don't know, let's say someone's 6 figures off. And how do they, even if they can prove that, hey, this is, this person did this, whatever, how does someone get out of that if you I don't have the money to pay for it? What do you do?
Well, there's different types of solutions based on the taxpayer, whether that's an individual or a business, based on their financial condition. So here's something that I hope everybody can hear and, really take away from this conversation with is the IRS in the state, if you have a tax debt, they're not there to put you out of business. They're not there to prevent you from having your home. They want their debt addressed, but they'll work with you as long as it looks like on paper you're doing what you can to put yourself in a position to address the debt. I've had clients come to me and oh, I owe $250,000 to the IRS on my income tax return, but I can't pay them a dime. And we start looking through the bank statements and they go out to eat, and it's $150 check 3 or 4 times a week. And they send their kids to private school and, they're going on vacation 8 times a year. Well, that when the IRS and states look at your financials, because they'll ask for things like copies of bank statements, copies of credit card bills, because they want to see what your spending habits are. If they're extreme like that, they're going to say, no, you need to pay me in full what you owe me. And we're not going to recognize you spending money that way.
Yeah.
So all that money calculates into what we think you can pay us every month.
Yeah. That's interesting. I don't know if you could put a percentage on this. What percentage of people that come to you are like, it was, they made a mistake, they were negligent, they didn't intentionally try to. And then do you ever have anyone who's like, listen, I'm whatever K in debt, and I did this on purpose. Like, it was my fault. Does that ever happen?
So I've had, well, there's a couple of differences there, right? There are the people who do it intentionally because then
Yeah.
they think they can file bankruptcy and just get out of the debt and walk away. That doesn't happen with taxes.
Right.
Especially if you have a business and your tax debt is payroll tax debt, because it's a trust tax. You collected the money from an innocent employee to hold in trust to turn over to the government, and you didn't. For that reason, you can't file bankruptcy and walk away from that debt.
Okay.
With income tax, and every state is a little different.
Yeah.
But the overarching rule of thumb is if you have income tax debt for the last three filing cycles, you cannot file bankruptcy and walk away from those debts. Older years, you can. But, nobody wants to file bankruptcy if they can prevent it.
Right.
Because it just tanks your credit and it's so hard to rebuild. Most people who come to me, something happened outside of their control that caused the debt to accrue. It could be, like, I had a client come to me just recently, and he's a plumber contractor on the East Coast. Really nice guy. He and his wife have a child who's on the spectrum, and they were having a lot of problems with him for several years, in and out of help and therapy. And, their mind was consumed on surviving and taking care of their son.
Right.
And because of that, they just let their finances fall apart other than just paying the bills that had to be paid.
Yeah.
Right. And because of that, they didn't file for several years. They had tax debt that they knew from prior years. And they were kind of ducking and covering with the IRS for a while. And things settled down, and they called me and said, you're probably going to think bad of us. It's never a judgment situation. It just is what it is. We all have different financial trials and tribulations in our lives.
Yeah.
And if it ends up causing a tax debt, so be it. There's a way to solve it as long as you're ready to do so.
Yeah.
It's like any debt, right? Credit cards can mount up, and then you get to a point where you're like, I can't breathe anymore. I just need to deal with this.
Yeah.
Same thing with tax debt. So it's there's always a solution. And that is like my key phrase that I focus on. It's just a matter of, are you ready to face it?
Yeah. Well, speaking of solutions, and it probably depends on the client and what's going on. I'm wondering if there's a specific piece of advice that you often, or maybe what's the piece of advice that you give that's most often given pushback on? Like, I don't want to do that. I'm not sure I agree with that. Like, is there something that you just know when I say this, they're not going to agree or listen or want to do it?
Yeah. So it usually falls with self-employed people. And it's surrounding the estimated tax payments they have to pay in relation to the income they're earning. I love having clients shift their mindset, right? When you're a W-2 employee and you get your paycheck, taxes are already withheld, right? When you work for yourself, you have to be diligent and pay attention to that on a consistent basis. Because if not, at the end of the year, when you file your tax return, you're going to get a nasty bill and you're going to get penalties for not paying throughout the year. Right. So what I always try to encourage my self-employed clients to do is, instead of following the semi-quarterly schedule the IRS and the states have, I think it's April 15th, June 15th, September 15th, and then January 15th. So it's not even quarterly. It's not really easy to keep at the top of your mind. Shift it to a monthly payment. Think of it like a car payment, and just every month, calculate what you think your tax bill is going to be and just pay it every month. It's going to be so much easier to manage and maintain. And a lot of clients are like, well, I don't know if I want to do that. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, then you've got to remember to do this on this like semi-quarterly plan. And it's tough. I have more people than not miss tax deposits because they're like, I don't want to pay it monthly. I'll just pay it on that goofy schedule. So
yeah, it is a weird schedule. Personally, as a pastor, it's like a weird thing where I'm W9 whatever employee, but I but it's self-employed at the same time because they have housing allowance, all these sort of things. And so, yeah, I'm always doing the quarterly thing of like, here's what I think I owe. And it's kind of annoying too. Let's talk about this tax thing.
Okay.
One of the things that's so annoying to me is like, I'm like estimating, here's what I think it is. And it's just like, it's so complicated. Like, why can't I just know? And then it's like the end of the year, did I pay enough? Did I not pay enough? And, you know, whatever. We'll start with this easy question. Like, why are tax codes so complicated?
Oh boy. You got about five sessions for us to talk about this. Our tax system, and this is, you know, we just went through an election cycle and there's big promises and they're going to reduce taxes. The hard part is our income tax system wasn't here 200 years ago, right?
Right.
And when they implemented it, it was supposed to be a temporary thing. And then it kind of just got finalized. And as the decades went, there was this silent, slowly increasing to the point where we are where we are today. And people are mad about it. Yeah. Especially because when we give the government this portion out of our income, it is supposed to be used in a financially responsible way by our government. And our government has gotten so bloated. And that's where things like the new Doge thing with Musk and Ramaswamy is coming into play. You know, the incoming president Trump is saying, we're going to cut taxes. There's no reason we should be paying this much. And it's because of the spending habits. And we're still in the red.
Yeah.
We owe as a country so much money. And it's so incredible to look at those numbers. And then you start looking at things like Rand Paul's annual Festivus report, where he says, you know, here's all the gross spending habits of our country. And you're like, oh my gosh, when people start putting together our money that we're taxed is supposed to go to things that benefit our country. But then you see where they're spending the money. It's like, whoa. Yeah. People get really angry. And hopefully what we're going to see is the tax system start slowing down, because we're going to get in front of the spending at the government level. Yeah. Because our taxes should be going to things like bettering our roads, right? Our military defense systems, our public education. All of our public programs are supposed to be funded by our taxes. Yeah. So when you start thinking about like, okay, if they're used in the manner with which our government said they would do it from the very beginning, I have no problem paying 10, 15, maybe 20% of what I earn. But then I always have people go through this exercise. Okay, in a month, count up how much in taxes you pay. Yeah. Cell phone bills, utility bills, our property taxes, pay at the gas pump, the grocery store. You know, everything is taxed on top of this income tax we're paying. Right. So I think we're going to see a lot of spotlight on that in the coming years. And hopefully we're going to see more of it returning to our pockets. But the reason I'm so sorry, I took a really long route on that. But the reason our tax code is so complicated is because people love their deductions. They love being able to say, well, I have 3 kids, so I get exemptions for all 3. And you know what? Rightfully so. You know, I donate this much money to St. Jude's or any other foundation that you like, our church, things like that. Okay, so we'll take that off of the income that you're then taxed on. Yeah. I don't think you're ever going to get to a point where it's just a flat tax everywhere. And a lot of it is because the people who back the politicians and all of us, we like having that game of, oh, okay, well, my business expenses I get to remove from consideration of how much the income number that I'm taxed on. Yeah. So I don't think we're ever going to get to a flat tax, but I think we're going to get to a point where our government is going to be more responsible with the way they pay the money or the way they spend the money that we pay. Yep. And then hopefully with that, we'll see a reduction in the amount that we end up paying. And then people are going to be like, oh yeah, I know this money is going for the betterment of me, my family, my neighbors, and everything else in the community. Yeah.
So somebody's listening to this, and you mentioned like, Department of Government Efficiency, the new things coming out. I think maybe the skeptic's like, yeah, but I feel like, especially someone who's not in all the tax world, it seems like every politician, Republican or Democrat, always talks about they're going to do X, Y, Z with taxes.
Right.
And it seems all it ever seems to get is more complicated.
I know.
So you sound like you think it might be somewhat less complicated. Like what would give you that optimism?
Because I think for the first time, we have outsiders from our political base, right? I mean, when you look at the politicians, they're career politicians.
Mm-hmm.
They know how to do the talk off, and they do it on both sides.
Yeah.
I think for the first time, we're seeing people from all walks of life being brought in and saying, evaluate this and see if this makes sense.
Yeah.
Does it make sense that we dump a bunch of money into researching lobsters taking drugs? Why? Why do we spend money like that? And it's tax dollars. So I think that we've finally got a group of people from all walks of life coming together and saying, okay, wait a minute. All of our citizens are contributing to this kitty that we have a responsibility to spend effectively and efficiently. We have a fiscal responsibility, and we need to start standing up and fulfilling that commitment that we're making.
Yeah. So is question 2 with let's see what the question is here. Obviously, there's a memes that go around every year. It's like the government's like, here's, they know how much they owe, but they won't tell you. And you're like trying to figure it out. And then you do your taxes and then you're wrong. And then they come after you. And it's like, why couldn't you just tell me? I guess my question is, I guess the government does know. And like, what's the likelihood for maybe like middle income, let's not talk about, like, just like personal person, not a business or whatever, for them coming after you for you being wrong? Or like, how far off do you have to be for them to like, for you to get flagged? Is it a lottery thing? Like, what's going on?
You mean for like an audit?
Yeah. Like, the joke is like, what I'm going to give, and then we do our best, but then we're wrong, but because they won't tell us. And so we do our best. And it's like, what are the chances, like, how wrong do you have to be for you to potentially be audited?
So I would say pretty wrong. And here's why. So all of our financial transactions now are electronically tracked, right? Every time you make a deposit in your bank, it gets recorded. Mm-hmm. Every time you have money sent to you via Venmo, right? They're tracking it. And that's a whole big thing about reporting that to the federal government. But what ends up happening is every big financial thing you do gets recorded. And if it meets these thresholds, it gets submitted to the IRS for the purposes of like your 1099s. If you are a contractor and you do work for a company and they issue you a 1099, they give that to you, but it's also submitted. It's also submitted to the SSA. SSA forwards it on to the Department of Treasury, and everything gets put into the computer system. This is part of, we're kind of peeling back layers of the onion and heading down some different tracks, but this is really interesting. So all of those financially reported activities get stored in the data banks. And when you submit your tax returns, it takes about 2 years, but eventually the computer system gets to a point where it matches what you report on your tax return to what was submitted by third parties under your Social Security number. And they match them. And if there's a problem, it'll get flagged. And then it goes to the audit department, and they will issue this first level notice. It's called a CP 2000. Hey, we got your tax return, but based on what was reported to us, there's a problem. Here's what it is. Can you respond within 30 days with documentation or clarification? And that starts that audit train. Now, there's another type of audit, which is completely random. And it only happens to a couple thousand taxpayers a year. And the name of the program escapes me for the moment, but what it does is it is constantly evaluating people's tax returns to identify averages. Okay. So if you are a W-2 employee and you have a side business, and these are all the expenses you claim for that side business, and then you have some dependents and you claim exemptions for them, there are a couple thousand people every year who get pulled for a full disclosure audit. And it's not because you did anything wrong. It's because the IRS is trying to recalibrate averages. So they ask you to submit everything. Your children's records, your bank statements, your income proof of all of your expenses. And that helps them set the averages every year of what will be used as a guideline to not flag people for audit. Isn't that scary?
So like, and that would be really frustrating too, because like I didn't even do anything wrong, and now I got to do all this work.
Right.
But so if I'm listening to this, I maybe the answer is because you'd have to hire more employees, and I'm sure this is complicated. But like, if everything's digital now, and the government is getting all of my stuff because my social security number, like why can't I go online when taxes are due, put in my information, and then be told, here's how much you owe us?
Because there are so many other deductions that you could possibly take that the computer system doesn't know. So this is kind of where like the idea of the government offering free e-file, it's kind of like, wait a minute, you're the one who's telling me how much I owe and you want me to trust your system? I don't know about that one. Same thing with TurboTax. TurboTax is a great option for people who are like W-2 employees. Maybe they have a kid. Maybe they have a small mortgage loan and they need to claim interest. It's really good for people like that, right? They're not looking for any financial advice. They just kind of duck and cover and kind of keep quiet into themselves. And they're very happy with that type of situation. TurboTax is great for do it all day long. Free file, do that all day long. You shouldn't pay somebody to do your tax return for you if your situation is that simple. If you're self-employed, an independent contractor, you have a small business, you have a large business, you have investments, things like that, you should not count on the information you're inputting into a program like that, because the program only knows what you enter into it. It can't have any insight into other things that you have going on and guide you to report something a different way, like in a different manner that will benefit you more. It's not that savvy.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of AI that's being introduced into the accounting world, and everybody who's been in the accounting world for a long time says, yeah, that's great for simple situations. But when you need guidance on how to make pivots, like my business, we've been an LLC. I incorporated it going into 2025 for tax benefits and some other reasons. I lean heavily, even though I'm an enrolled agent, my specialty is tax debt, but I have somebody who is a tax advisor who is on the front side of the tax world, who does like all of our bookkeeping and annual filing and everything else. And I think of her as like a member of my board. And I get with her every month and we talk about where we are, where we're going, and what needs to be done. And you make pivots with a business throughout the year, depending on what's happening with your financial figures. And that's why I say for anybody who is self-employed, independent contractor, you want somebody like that who knows what you don't know and how to position you in a better way moving forward.
Yes, I was going to ask about the TurboTax. That makes sense. So, yeah. Well, I would say, so that makes sense. So with that, then like, let's say someone's okay, I think, I've got a few things going on. Maybe I've done TurboTax in the past. Like I probably should get some help. Are you like, how do you know, like, who do you go to? Is it like an H&R Block person? Is there like a specific, like, what would you recommend for somebody to find someone to get help?
I kind of, and maybe it's a little unfair, but I kind of lump H&R Block, and those box, I kind of think of them as fast food tax solutions for people. I think they're very good with the simple things. Hey, I'm a W-2 employee. We have a house. We have 2 kids. Can you do our annual tax return for us? Yeah, no problem. But when you've got a business, when you're self-employed, you're looking at expenses to write off, things like that. You really want a CPA, an enrolled agent, an accountant who's been doing it for 20 years. And the best place to start are your friends who are in business as well. Or maybe go to your chamber of commerce and talk to some people and say, I'm looking for a new accountant. Who would you recommend? You can go, I mean, Google is fantastic for this. You kind of are flying in a little blind that way. I always like direct referrals. Every time a client comes to me and says, I haven't filed in a long time, I need to file, I start with, what industry are we in? I want to find a CPA or an enrolled agent who has extensive knowledge of that industry. Because if let's say you have a restaurant and you go to an accountant who has never handled a restaurant's books before, they're not going to tell you, hey, you're not claiming this expense, but maybe you should. Let's talk about this. You want somebody who has experience in your industry because, man, they're going to take that previous knowledge that they've gained and apply it to benefit you.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I was going to ask, maybe like, what's one of the biggest misunderstandings that people have when it comes to filing taxes? It sounds like one is get some tax help. If you have a little bit complication, like don't just rely on the system.
Yeah.
But like, what are some other issues that you see people do when it comes to filing their taxes?
My favorite like nails on a chalkboard moment is when people will meet with their CPA or accountant once a year. And it's when they turn in all their paperwork and say, here you go, file my tax return. Because at that point, it's usually February or March. Like for this year, let's take last year's filing season. We're in it now, right? We're in January, heading into February. And you go to your accountant and say, okay, here's all my records for last year. And they say, okay, well, because we didn't take advantage of a pivot that we could have put in place, you have a tax consequence. Well, then the client's upset and they say, yeah, but you didn't call me all of 2024 and tell me changes were happening. Yeah. I could have told you, okay, if that's happening, then we need to make a pivot. We need to implement a different strategy that will save you money at the end of the year. Yeah. So open communication with your trusted tax professional is key. Yeah.
And going a step further, so maybe some mistakes, unwise, we should do that. What are some things that people do that get them into trouble, like that you find?
Oh boy, there's a whole wide range that we can talk about. I've had people who ended up in tax issues because they got an inheritance and just went out and blew it, thinking that there was no consequence.
Yeah.
I've had people who didn't keep their records and tried to claim expenses, and then they got flagged for an audit. And a lot of self-employed 1099 people, mileage. You've got to keep a mileage log. And it can't just be on this date I went here, on this date I went here. It's got to be starting mileage at the beginning of the year, where you went, the address that you went, how many miles you went, what day it was, and what the purpose was. If you don't keep that, they can say, oh no, we're not going to let you now in 2025 claim 70 cents a mile as a business expense. Yeah. You want to do that. And a lot of times it's the paperwork that people fail to maintain.
Yeah, it makes sense. What happens, like, let's say somebody, whether they get the random lottery or maybe the IRS flags them for mishandling their taxes, and it's not like big expenses, but it's significant for them. Like, what are some basic tips you would give someone who maybe gets that first letter from the IRS and they're freaking out and they don't know what to do?
Okay, don't freak out. That's the first thing. Like, don't freak out. Here's the thing. People give debt and financial problems a lot more power over them than it deserves. Okay, this is just when the IRS reaches out to you with that CP 2000 and says, hey, we think there's a problem. Can you respond with X, Y, and Z? Don't start sweating. It's just a simple response that they need. They need you to provide proof of whatever the discrepancy is. And 9 times out of 10, if you submit to them what they're asking for, you'll get a letter saying, okay, great, thanks, no changes. Have a good day.
Even if like you owed, they'll do
well,
that?
If you owed, then they're going to say, okay, we recalculated this. Here's a bill. Please pay this. And you can call them and say, hey, I can't pay this right away. Can I set up some monthly payments? They'll do that.
Okay. Well, anything else? Any other thoughts?
No, don't give it more power
Yeah.
than it rightfully is owed.
Yeah.
I have a lot of people who come to me and they're losing sleep at night.
Right.
Obviously when you've got a tax debt and it's sitting there, you're not addressing it. It sits at the back of your head, right? It's this
Yeah.
cloud hanging over you.
Yeah.
And don't think by reaching out that you're less than, or you're weak, or you made bad decisions and somebody's going to judge you, because that's never the case. It's
Yeah.
always, okay, here's where you are right now. Yeah, it stinks, but we can address it. There's a solution. Let's start walking those steps.
Yeah.
I think the people get intimidated and end up with an action paralysis because they don't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that just makes it worse.
Yeah. At what point would you recommend somebody reaching out for help? Is it right away if it stresses them out? Should they try it on their own?
Yeah, right away. Right
Yeah.
away. Because there's always a solution.
Yeah.
We, with my firm, not everybody's a client, and we don't want everybody to be a client. We just released a masterclass online for people who owe less than the thresholds where they should consider hiring a resolution expert like me. But they need some guidance. They need tips and tricks. They need steps to follow, and they need to know what to say and how to push back and how to ask for a reduction of the balance. I'm so excited about this masterclass. I think a lot of people who fall into that, I don't know enough where it makes sense to hire somebody, but I need help knowing how to handle this. I'm so excited because I think it's going to help a lot of people.
If somebody's listening and they're wanting more information, where can they go to access that?
Yeah, go to my website, reach out to me.
Okay.
My website is Golden Lion Tax Solutions. Think of a big gold lion, right? And or look me up online. You can find me on social media. You can find our company online, and our website has my direct phone number and email on it. Reach out to me.
Awesome.
I have no problem helping people.
And we'll link to all that in the show notes as well. People can get the contact and the links to that. The big question everybody has about taxes, and I know I don't know if you can answer this because I know it's very situation specific, but what are some common strategies that the average person might not know about when it comes to reducing or lowering the amount of taxes that they owe?
Okay, so there's two different ways to do it. One is asking for the penalties to be removed. Okay. And the IRS and states charge penalties because you've gone against their law that they've put in place of what you need to pay and when and how. Okay. It's just like when we were kids and we got in trouble. Parents put a bar of soap in our mouth or stand in the corner or you get a little swat on the rear end. It's the adult way of, okay, well, we can't punish you any other way but hitting your pocketbook. So asking for those penalties to be removed, you have to have a reason. A lot of the states and the IRS do, hey, if it's your first time having a hiccup, we'll give you a first time abatement. Just because you've never had a problem before, don't do it again, though, please. Right? The other way, though, is to settle the debt. And this is a long, drawn out process. Some states don't even have this option, but the IRS does, and most of the states do. They call it an offer in compromise or an offer in settlement. But you do a full dress down with your financials. Hey, here's everything about me financially. As you can see, I have no way to pay this debt back.
Yeah.
They will consider settling it, but it's a long process and it takes a lot of going back and forth. And, it's one of those processes where a lot of people think they're in a position to settle it, but they're not. I mean, you have to pretty much be at the poverty level.
Okay. I know deductions are another big piece for people. Can we talk a little bit about maybe the standard deduction? I think that's also changing this year, which it probably changes every year.
Changes every year.
If someone's like, how do I know if I can start deducting stuff personally or taking the standard deduction? What's the thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a Schedule A for the 1040. Okay, and Schedule A is your itemized deduction schedule. Walk through it. It takes into account medical and dental expenses, state and local taxes, charitable contributions, out-of-pocket business expenses if you're a W-2 employee. But those are there are tough parameters around those. All of those items, walk through that. and see if it amounts to more than the standard deduction for the year.
Yeah.
And if not, if you're on that cusp and you're like, wow, I haven't been giving to my church, or I haven't been giving to my favorite foundation or
Right.
donation center the way I wanted to, plan for that in the next year so you can up your game a little bit. Again, this is why working with a tax advisor is a really good idea. They're going to give you ideas of how you can put yourself in a more beneficial tax position.
Yeah. I was going to ask, it's probably been answered, like, what are some of the reasons that can lead people to reach out to you? I think part of it maybe is family, you trust someone you shouldn't have. Like, what are some of the other reasons that people call you for?
We've had situations where a business has been thriving and in existence for 10, 15, 20 years, and then competition will open up down the street and it'll take away their client base, and everything that they had built as status quo changed, but they didn't pivot fast enough. And before you know it, they're scrambling to pay bills. And, one of the easiest places for a business owner to take money to kind of borrow it for a time being is from the taxes, because if you don't pay your suppliers, they're not going to deliver more product so you can tend to the clients you do have. If you don't pay your employees their wages, they're going to walk off the job. If you don't pay your utilities, your power's going to get shut down. But if you don't pay your taxes right away, it takes a while for the IRS and the state to catch up to it. It could be with the state 2 or 3 months, and it could be with the IRS 3-4 quarters.
Yeah, good.
So,
now you mentioned too, obviously you enjoy the aspect of helping people, but you still also have to do the work of the taxes. So what would you like? What is your favorite thing about what you get to do? What do you enjoy?
oh boy, I love problem solving. I really do. I've had situations where clients came to me and said, I was talking to my friend's CPA and he said we could do an offer and compromise. And I sit down and I look at it. I'm like, you can't do an offer and compromise. You have more equity in your home than you owe on your taxes. The IRS will just come in and say, okay, well, sell your home or pull the equity out of it to pay us, and then you're done. You're free. Move on. Godspeed,
Yeah.
I've had situations where someone came to me and they'd been taken advantage of by a resolution mill. There's a lot of them out there. You'll see commercials for them. And they paid these companies thousands of dollars and nothing got done. And, they feel horrible, but the IRS is kicking up again and they don't know what to do. And we step in and say, okay, we can have a solution identified within 10 days of how we're going to map this out and how we're going to move forward.
Yeah. Cool.
And then it's just a matter of taking the baby steps to get there. But when we commit to a solution, it's based off of a full investigation that we do where we pull the data from the tax agency. We say, hey, hold on. I want to hold on the account because we're working on a solution. We go through the client's full financial statement and we pull one together and let's talk about everything. The big key is remember that when you talk to somebody and seek help, don't hide things. Don't say, oh, well, I'm going to keep these 3 credit cards a secret and I'm going to tell them everything else. Do you have a second? Because I have a funny story about this.
For sure.
So this goes back to early 2000. Right? I'm a newer representative and I'm working with a client and I've got a revenue officer that we're working with at the IRS. And this guy owed, I think, $120,000 to the IRS in income tax. And he's self-employed and he's telling me the story of, poor him. He's had some problems and, he's barely keeping food on the table and a roof over his kid's mouth. And so I call this revenue officer at the IRS and I say, hey, I'm going to pull a financial statement together. I'll get it over to you. Let's talk about a deadline. And can you hold off on any collection threats? Oh, yeah. So I pull a financial statement together and I have the client sign it and I send it to the revenue officer and he calls me. This is back in the days of faxing, right? He calls me not 20 minutes later. Morgan, we've got a problem. I said, what's going on? He said, well, I'm looking at this financial statement and I see your client signed it under penalty of perjury, right? Which is big deal. Okay. I said, yeah. He said, I think before I officially accept this, you need to go back to him and talk to him about his cars. So what are you talking about? He said, we have full DMV records. Like the federal agencies all share their records, right? You need to go back before I accept this. I'm going to shred this. Go back and ask him about his cars. I said, okay. So I call the client and he says, oh, yeah, I forgot to tell you. My uncle passed away and left me a Ferrari.
Oh, jeez.
And it's sitting in my barn. What? It was like a $95,000 car back then.
Oh my
And
goodness.
oh yeah, and then also he had a couple of other cars and he had a boat that he didn't disclose to us. So we quickly, like, thank God the revenue officer
Oh
was
yeah,
so nice because that guy could have been arrested.
man.
He could have had charges pressed against him for lying under penalty of
Yeah.
perjury.
Wow.
I mean, so if you're looking for anybody to help, you know, just about tax strategies or anything else, disclose everything. Because if
Yeah.
you don't, they're not going to be as efficient in giving you the guidance and advice that you need.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So someone in your profession, I'm curious what like the work load looks like. So is it like heavy first quarter, the rest of the year? Is it just like every quarter when it pops up? Is it March to April? It's like long weeks. What's it like for
Year
you?
round. It's year round. And it's really because when clients come to me, they have to be ready to address it. They have to say, okay, enough. I'm tired of having this tax bill hanging over my head. I need help. I need somebody to help me get through this. And that happens 365 days a year.
Okay.
You know?
All the time.
Yeah.
How do you, what does it look like for you in managing your business, Golden Line Tax Solutions, people reaching out to you? Like how do you do you have any parameters around your work schedule? Or you're like, I'll take anything. Like, how do you kind of decide what you're going to take on, what you're going to do?
You know, I try to help everybody. I will tell people, you don't want to be a client. You don't need to be a client. You need, and that's why I created this masterclass. I have a lot of people who call me, probably 10 to 15 people a month who call me and say, I have this debt. I can't sleep. I don't know what to do. And I say, okay, well, first things first, there's always a solution. Let's talk about it. How much do you owe? I owe $8,500 to the IRS. And while that seems like an oppressive amount to them, it's not a significant enough debt to pay a tax resolution expert to get involved. And I always sit down and say, okay, take out a pen and a piece of paper. You shouldn't hire anybody to handle this. And there are a lot of firms out there who will say, okay, pay me $1,500 to do it.
Yeah.
They pay them $1,500 and then they still have to pay the whole debt.
Yeah.
It's just having an ethical place to go to get an honest answer.
Yeah.
That's what I really wanted to create. And that's why I created this masterclass. People should have a way to get instructions without paying an arm and a leg when their balance is that low.
Yeah.
Great. We have people who come to us who say, oh, I have $150,000 debt, but I can't pay you. I'm like, well, you're not my client then. I appreciate it, but, we have bills to pay too as a business, But yeah, it's interesting how many people want to be a client but shouldn't be, or want to be a client but can't.
Correct.
Yeah.
This might be hard to answer. If you could change one thing about how taxes work in the United States, what would you do?
I'm not trying to be political, but it would be on the end of how the money is spent.
Yeah.
Because honestly, I feel like if our government took that fiduciary role with the money we all put in the kitty with more attention and a commitment of responsibility to the people who are paying it, I feel like we would all be able to pay less.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be nice? That'd be great. I'm curious too. I mean, this has been awesome hearing some personal stories and kind of help. You don't just like do this as a job. You start a company. You did Golden Line Solutions. Well, I'm like, what are Golden Line Tax Solutions? What led you to start Golden Line, and how long have you been leading it?
That's a great question. As I said, I've been in this industry for 25 years, and I had been with one firm the whole time, and it changed hands, and they started doing things like, well, every communication with clients are going to be form letters now. And everything is going to be, very formatted. You're not going to work with the client's CPA as much as you used to, and every client's tax situation, while we follow the same kind of maps to get them resolved, every client's situation is different.
Yeah.
Like I have clients right now that I'm working with. It's a conglomerate of doctors, and they were all taking distributions from their practice, but not paying the estimated tax payments the way they're supposed to. And it caused personal tax debt issues for themselves. So I contacted their CPA and I said, hey, what do you think? Because we've got this problem on the personal side of putting them on more payroll and limiting the distributions. And he was like, yes, absolutely. This is not traditional, but it fits this situation to benefit them. It takes a burden off of them. So we worked together to do that. And the firm I'd been working with, no, you can't do that. Every client is just form letters. And, for efficiency, they tried that. But, it's like telling a lawyer, every client has to be handled the exact same way. Well, you can't do that when everybody's situation is so unique. Yeah. And I just felt I'd been encouraged several times over my career to broach out on my own and create my own business. And I finally said, okay, I'm at a point where I can do it. And, my husband and I spent many nights talking about it and analyzing it. And he's like, okay, it's your thing. Do it. Yeah. And, it's hard having a business is challenging with so many things. I was on the phone with my father this morning and I was talking about some ideas I have. And he said, you're always thinking about your business, aren't you? You're always thinking about your clients. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I go on vacation and I don't stop. Yeah. On the weekends, it doesn't stop. I don't shut down my computer and really walk away 100%. Yeah. But it's also what inspires me. So, our mission is to just help as many people as we can with the ethical handling of their situation, of a situation that really scares them. Yeah. And by giving the best guidance we possibly can.
And how long has Golden Lion been around now?
2.5 years.
Okay. So it's still, somewhat fresh, at least in how long you've been in the industry. I'm curious, you have the helping people with taxes, that sort of thing, but then you have the added benefit, pressure, various words you could use of actually running a business.
Right.
So how have you balance those two things, marry those two things? Has it been what you thought? Has it been more enjoyable? Has it been harder to start Golden Lion?
Those are great questions. Now I switch from the tax advocate hat and I've put on the business owner hat.
Right.
It's been difficult in ways that I didn't think it would be. I had a theory of if you build it, they will come, and getting the word out there first and foremost to CPAs and accountants to say, hey, you don't need to be everything to everybody. This is what I specialize in. I would love to be your allied partner. Step in to help with this one situation, be a teammate, and then step out when we're done. Yeah. Trying to get CPAs and accountants to understand that that's a benefit to them because they've got somebody who knows how to do this, who's done this 1,000 times versus them trying to do it. Has been a bit more of a challenge than I thought it would be. Yeah. But with time and just people hearing me and seeing me and understanding what we do and how we operate, we're getting more and more people to realize that we truly are that temporary team member to bring in to handle this one situation and then we back out. And, great working with you all. Hopefully you don't need us again.
Yeah. Because I'm curious how client acquisition works for you. Because obviously, I'm assuming you don't have a lot of repeat clients. Once you figure out their solution.
We have a couple.
You do? Okay. Now, is this planned or is this unplanned?
Oh, unplanned. I had a client that found me after 12 years I had worked with them. And she called me and said, you're going to kill me. I did it again. And I hunted you down because I trust you. You handled me the right way, years and years and years ago. And I loved working with you. But in that instance, again, they had something that was outside of their control that threw the whole company sideways. And I said, no problem. Let's jump in. Let's get it handled again. And, a couple months later, we were done. And she was just like, not that I love having you in my back pocket, but it feels good to know you're there,
So how does that work? I mean, I maybe like if someone's in a tax debt situation, are they just like Googling you? Or is there CPA recommending you? How do you, reach and grow your base?
A little bit of all of it, honestly.
Okay.
So a lot of these bigger companies that you see the advertisements for, they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on marketing, and they have a floor of people who are cold calling tax liens. When the tax agencies file a lien, public record, and there are these data mining companies that sell these leads to these companies, and they'll have people dialing all day long, just trying to get people to answer their phone. And that is such an intimidating thing for a taxpayer to feel.
Yeah.
They get scared, and these companies will be predators on that feeling, on that scared aspect that these people, it's almost like suffocating them. And then they call and say, well, you better handle this right away. You've got a tax lien and we can help, and just pay us this money and we can get it done. And they pressure these people to sign on, and you pray that they follow through. And some of them do. I've had people that I've heard of who have had good experiences. That's great. My goal is just every single client gets handled the same way. I will not commit to you to do something that we know we can't do. We will do a full investigation before we commit to what we can do for you. And then you better believe, you call our office, you're going to hear from us within one business day. Unless there's something extreme going on, like we're out of town for a convention or something like that. But a lot of the mills that you hear about, people will pay them money and then they won't hear from them for 3 weeks.
Right.
They call and, they have to hound them to get a call back. And this is why I formed my company, because when somebody's in a tax situation and they're scared, you have an obligation and a commitment as their tax professional to help them with that. If they're calling you and you're not responding, that just adds to their anxiety.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
that makes sense.
I don't know. We don't do outbound marketing. We're on social media. We communicate with, I think we have 3,000 CPAs and accountants across the nation who know of us, that we let them know, hey, we're here as a solution. Use us if you have a client who has a situation. We'd love to be a part of the team to help solve it.
Yeah.
And, we get about, I'd say between 65 and 80 clients a year, just from people calling and saying, hey, I'd like to talk to you. I've got a client who has a situation. And we hope to grow that base. But, there's a bigger plan here that I'm not in charge of. I just do what I can every day and let people know I'm here.
Yeah, that's great. Well, speaking of being here, Morgan, this was a great conversation, really interesting. I know we hit on it a little bit, but last question here, like if you want to connect with you online, like where can they find you, your website, social media, even that master class, where can they go?
Yeah, look me up, Morgan Anderson. Put the Q in the middle. It'll definitely lead you there.
All right.
Go on our website. Our phone number, I'm sure, will be in the call notes as well. Pick up the phone, shoot me an email, connect with me online, and we'll get you taken care of.
Awesome. Yeah, like I said, I'll put all that in the show notes. You guys can go there. Morgan, thanks for the time, and thanks for being on the show today.
Thanks so much for having me, Dylan. It was great.